This is eastern Ukraine. Conflict broke out here in 2014 and it hasn't ended. There are about 100,000 fighters stationed here, making it the most militarized area on earth. There are Ukrainian forces to the west and Russia-backed separatist militias to the east. Fighting between the two groups occurs here along the contact line. In 2015, after nearly a year of deadly fighting, a peace agreement called for a ceasefire, creating this security zone. The agreement was supposed to stop the fighting and resolve the conflict between Ukraine and the separatists. But 3 years later, the security zone remains as the most violent place in Ukraine. Why? The peace agreement is violated almost every single day in East Ukraine, which reportedly puts about 100,000 civilians in constant danger. Over 10,000 people have died since the conflict in Ukraine began, and 1.5 million have been displaced, while both the sides continue to build up their forces. The conflict began at the end of 2013 when the Ukrainian government rejected an association with the European Union in order to build stronger ties to Russia. The pro-Moscow move led to massive protests in the capital Kiev, which turned deadly by 2014. Russia took advantage of this chaos and sent its military into annexed Crimea in the March. A month later, pro-Russian separatists in the Donbass seized the cities of Luhansk and Donetsk and declared them independent from Ukraine. The Ukrainian army had moved to take back the region, but Russia covertly joined the separatist rebels, which led to fierce fighting for several months. In February 2015, both the sides agreed on a peace agreement called Minsk II. The deal laid down conditions for a ceasefire where heavy military, tanks and mortars were to be banned. Foreign militaries, meaning Russia, had to leave Ukraine. It also recognized the two separatist areas, the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, and outlined how they could be reincorporated back into Ukraine. But despite the agreement, none of that has ever happened. To understand why, you have to know what Ukraine means to Russia's President Vladimir Putin.
Last one out of the Soviet Union, please turn out the light. The vitally important Ukraine announced
independence for the republic.
The people there are more Russian than Ukrainian.
Much to fear. Separate Ukraine would be a catastrophe.
Ukraine was a part of the Russian Empire in the 19th century and the USSR in the 20th. When the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, its western territories broke into independent states including Ukraine. They formed a buffer between Russia and the West. But in the 90s and the 2000s, these countries started moving westwards and many joined the EU. By invading Ukraine, Putin was able to destabilize it and stop it from developing stronger ties with the West. Russia continues to fuel the fighting by supporting the separatists and keeps its own military at the ready. Meanwhile, Ukraine is forced to devote resources to its defense. Both sides have ignored the ceasefire so far, and a closer look at the front line reveals just how unstable the region is. The separatist rebels in the LPR and DPR have the fundings, weapons and the assurance of the massive Russian military behind them. They are responsible for the majority of ceasefire violations. On the Ukrainian side, the forces are a mix of Ukrainian army soldiers and volunteer militias. These militias are funded by Ukrainian oligarchs and members of the parliament. Some have a far-right view and even have attacked the Kiev government. But Kiev continues to fund and support these armed groups anyways. Is the only defense against the Russia-backed rebels in the east. So despite a ceasefire that could have ended the conflict, there's an active war on the ground. Both the sides continue to fire heavy artillery on a regular basis as a show of strength. Power, water and supplies are common targets, and the heaviest price is paid by the hundreds of thousands of civilians trapped in the crossfire.